are going to briefly return to regular session for purpose of taking up adjourn in memory requests. In addition, we have guests from the 4th grade class of the Christian School of the Desert, Mr. Nastandi's district. Please welcome them. They're upstairs in the gallery. Welcome to the chamber. Members, we are very close to adjourning the 8th session and also for adjourning for the day. However, we have several members who have requested to adjourn in memory. If you would still like to adjourn in memory, please indicate by putting your mics up and I will call on you. The following members have made those requests: Mr. Amiano, Mr. Arambula, Valines and Gilmore, Ms. Harkey, Mr. Huffman, Ms. Lowenthal, Mr. Monning and Portantino, and Mr. Nielsen has 2 requests. We will begin with Mr. Amiano.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I rise today to adjourn in memory of Gerard Joseph Page. Gerard gently passed away in San Francisco after an extended illness. His children, Richard and Paul, remember him as their best friend and hero. He was always a gentleman. In 1942, Gerard joined the U.S. Navy when he was barely 17 years old. Leaving his home in Lowell, Massachusetts, San Francisco would become his home port, and he always wanted to return and live in San Francisco. Later in life, he worked for the Digital Equipment Corporation. Gerard had a lifelong passion for collecting coins and seashells and creating all sorts of invention. He shared these good things with his brothers and sisters and many nieces and nephews. He and his son Paul would spend hours in thrift shops looking for bargains and great deals in San Francisco. Gerard will be remembered as a beloved father and friend to all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Amiano. Mr. Arambula.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I share with you today our sorrow for 2 fallen police officers. 2 officers in law enforcement in the county of Fresno and in the city of Reedley. During a routine attempt to serve a search warrant to a Minkler resident who for months had been suspected of shooting at neighbors' property and setting fires in adjoining lands, the attempt to serve the search warrant ended up, unfortunately, in gunfire. The shootout drew hundreds of law enforcement officers from police agencies throughout the San Joaquin Valley. And unfortunately, Sheriff's Deputy Joel Wallenmeyer and Reedley police officer Javier Bejar both lost their lives to the shooter. Deputy Joel Wallenmeyer, 49, was pronounced dead at the Fresno hospital the morning of the shooting. And Officer Bejar, 28, who was critically wounded, died last week after being removed from life support. Deputy Wallenmeyer was a graduate of Fresno High School. He attended Reedley College, Fresno City College, and California State University, Fresno. He worked various assignments throughout his career, including court services and as a property detective, and he was a field training officer, a school resource officer, and a member of the search and rescue team. Wallenmeyer is survived by his wife, Bev, of 26 years, a daughter, Amy, 24, a son, Austin, 21, as well as his parents. Officer Javier Bejar joined the Reedley Police Department in 2005. He was an Officer of the Year in 2007. Born in Mexico, he graduated from Reedley High School. He went on to join the United States Marine Corps, where he served a tour in Iraq and Kuwait. He was awarded numerous honors. Officer Bejar is survived by his wife, Miriam. The loss of Officer Bejar and Deputy Wallenmeyer is a tragedy to our entire community. Our prayers go out to the family and friends, and I respectfully ask that we adjourn in both of their memories. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Arambula. Mr. Gilmore, for the same gentleman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I too rise to adjourn in memory of these 2 fallen officers Last Thursday, when you sat in session, I attended Deputy Wallemar's funeral. There were over 2,500 in attendance. Affectionately known as Wally. I want you to visualize just a picture, if you will. Oftentimes when we adjourn in memory, we get kind of lost in the words. Make no mistake about it, ladies and gentlemen. These two fine representatives of our state and law enforcement are guardians of freedom and democracy in this great country that we live in. Their families will live with this tragedy forever. I would ask that today we think of their families. We think of the sacrifices of those that serve this great country in this wonderful state that we serve. And I would ask each of you, as members of this body, as these sergeants in this room provide a service to each of us, and the California Highway Patrolmen that are in this building, that provide protective services for each in this building and the people of this great state. Think of them. Pray for their families this evening. And pay tribute to them today. And thank you for this opportunity to adjourn in memory of these fine American heroes. God bless the United States of America.
Thank you, Mr. Gilmore. Ms. Harkey.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I have a very sad duty here today. We lost a dear friend, a longtime associate, who I really had no idea who had pancreatic cancer. Suzanne Williams Dykema, beloved wife of Dale Dykema, sister and aunt and friend, lost her hard-fought, year-long battle with pancreatic cancer on March 3rd. Now, I saw this woman over the holidays or early December. Had no idea that she was even ill, and her husband had never mentioned it to me in previous conversations. She leaves behind her cherished husband Dale, as I said, her sister Cindy, nieces Sterling and Shannon, and many, many wonderful friends. She was preceded in death by her father, Joseph William, and mother, Shirley Curry. Suzanne was born in Cleveland, Ohio, on January 5th of 1946. She moved to Atlanta, Georgia in 1951 and later attended Ohio Wesleyan College, where she received a degree in journalism. She moved to California in 1971, and she claimed that the happiest day of her life was August 12, 1988, when she and Dale married in Hawaii. They settled on the bluffs of Newport Beach, and they set out on a blissful marriage, and I can attest to that, of many years of traveling and political involvement and business involvement, and just were the most blessed and happy couple I think I've ever met. Suzanne will be remembered as a beautiful, caring friend who never met a stranger. She was always there. Celebrations of her life are going to be announced at a later date. Her husband has decided to leave town for a while to get his thoughts together. So in lieu of flowers, contributions may be made to her Suzanne Dykema Memorial Fund, and those donations will be to fight pancreatic cancer. Thank you so much, and I express sympathy for the family and friends. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harkey. Mr. Huffman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We sometimes adjourn this institution in memory of people who led very public lives, who did things that made them public figures. These are great people, and it's appropriate that we honor them in this institution. But there are also great people worth honoring just because they lived their lives well, because they were wonderful friends, good neighbors, because they were great guys to share a beer with or have a horseshoes game with, or because they were just always there for their family. And today, I adjourn in memory of such a person. Vinton John Roseborough, or Vint as everyone knew him, was my next-door neighbor for the past 15 years. And even though he was not a public figure or anyone you'd read about in the newspapers, he would have fit in perfectly right here in the State Assembly. He was never shy about pointing out things that were going well in government and also things that didn't work. Mainly, he talked about things that didn't work. He would always greet you with a smile, slap you on the back, and remember exactly what you'd talked about the last time you met. He was born and raised in Stockton, but unfortunately for California politics, this very conservative Republican somehow managed to settle in very blue Marin County, and so his political talents were lost. Vint had a love-hate relationship with the game of golf. He was an extremely well-informed and well-read guy, but he was really never happier than just relaxing with a Miller Genuine Draft and some friends and family and having a chat. Vint was a very kind and gentle friend, a great neighbor, a loving father, a husband, a grandfather, and someone who will be missed by all who knew him, including this very liberal next-door neighbor. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Huffman. Ms. Lowenthal?
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members, for granting this honor to Dr. Nolan Kramer of adjourning in his memory today. Dr. Kramer, a longtime Long Beach Peninsula resident, a prominent physician, passed away Sunday, February 21st at the age of 76. He served at the Children's Hospital in Los Angeles in the early 60s. He served in the 91st Evacuation Hospital in Cam Ranh Bay in Vietnam. He served at Letterman Hospital in San Francisco, at Long Beach Community, Bellwood Hospital in Bellflower, Tri-City in Hawaiian Gardens. I won't read the entire list, but the point is very simply that he did deliver services wherever they were needed. He was an avid skier and a seasoned traveler, adventurer, and pilot. Dr. Kramer is survived by his wife, Anne, 5 children, 9 grandchildren, 6 great-grandchildren, and his brother and sister. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lowenthal. Mr. Monning and Mr. Portantino have a request to adjourn in memory.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I rise today to ask you to join me as we adjourn in memory of Louisa Charmaine Benson Craig. Ms. Craig died on February 2nd after a protracted battle with cancer. Louisa Craig was born in Rangoon, Burma, to a Sephardic Jewish father and a Karen mother. She was a refugee for much of her childhood, first during the Second World War and then following the outbreak of the Burmese Civil War. After winning Miss Burma titles in 1956 and 1958 and starring in several Burmese films in her late teens and early 20s, she married Brigadier General Lin Tin, commander of the Karen Army's 5th Brigade. When he was assassinated during peace talks with the Burmese military regime in 1965, she went on to assume leadership of his troops and was assigned the rank of lieutenant colonel in the Karen National Army. In 1967, living in exile, Louisa married Glenn Craig, with whom she went on to raise 3 children in Los Angeles. She completed her graduate studies in international affairs at Columbia University and represented the Karen National Union and Ethnic Nationalities Council before the United Nations and at U.S. congressional hearings. She was a co-founder of the U.S. Campaign for Burma and Alternatives for Burmese Children, which sought to bring democracy to Burma along with educational opportunities. She was the only named plaintiff in the groundbreaking lawsuit against Unocal, which brought international attention to the plight of Burmese workers held in virtual slavery during the construction of the oil pipeline in Burma. She was also active in bringing refugees to the United States from refugee camps in Thailand and maintained an active support for the Burmese refugee community until days before she died. Na Louisa Charmaine Craig is survived by her husband Glenn Craig of Altadena, 3 children and 4 grandchildren. Thank you, members, for adjourning today in her memory.
Thank you, Mr. Monning. Mr. Portantino.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I join Mr. Monning and I believe Mr. Furtani in commenting and recognizing the life and memory of Louisa Benson Craig, who was a resident of my district. You know, oftentimes we do resolutions, we do legislation about civil rights and dignity, and we try and endeavor in this House to bring that struggle to the forefront. But here was a woman who lived her entire life actually fighting that battle on the front line in her native country before immigrating to this country, where she continued to take that battle with every breath of her life. And I join with Mr. Monning, who is a personal friend, and know he suffers from her loss as well, in adjourning in her memory. And we will sorely miss her and sorely miss her fighting for a wonderful cause to bring dignity and respect to those who need it most.
Thank you, Mr. Portantino. Our final request to adjourn, yes, Mr. Furtani.
I'd like to also adjourn in memory of Ms. Craig as well. Her work in the Burmese American community and along the side with the refugees from those countries really had a very important role relative to the community here as well. And with, I really thank Mr. Monty for bringing this forward and raising this individual's life in front of us so we can all respect it and adjourn in her memory.
Thank you, Mr. Furtani. Our final request to adjourn is from Mr. Nielsen. You have 2 adjournments.
Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly, I, as Assemblyman Huffman adjourned in honor of his neighbor, I ask your honoring my neighbor, Sheila LeRae Saul. Richard and Sheila both had cancer. Richard went into remission, Sheila's did for a time, and then became active, and she passed away. We celebrated her life in the little town of Orland last Saturday. And lest you think that these adjourns in honor are routine and boring, I can tell you that I did acknowledge we would be adjourning in Sheila's honor to this assembly in Orland. I talked to Richard, her husband, this morning, and he said he'd received over 25 cards or letters lifting him up in his spirits as he grieves, but also acknowledging how significant it was to them that this honorable body would remember Sheila, and how deeply Richard was moved. And he asked me to personally thank you today for adjourning in her honor. A thoroughly accomplished person. She was a Navy brat and traveled all over, but then settled with Richard in the Santa Clara area. He worked at San Jose State University, and they commuted to their little ranch up in Gerber on the weekends and got 10 delightful and blissful years up there of retirement together. A thoroughly accomplished and wonderful lady. I would also ask that we adjourn in memory of Molly Wilson, a true legend of Shasta County, a gracious woman, mother, wife, activist. She and her husband Lou very prominent in the timber industry in many counties. She hailed from England and maintained her lovely accent. She was one of the original Rosie the Riveters working in Spitfire factories in England during World War II, and then settled in Reading and became a community leader, giving her heart to her church, her community, and then many, many years as a Shasta County supervisor. Also magnificent about her was her gardening skills. Her garden was a legend, and one of my most pleasant memories was an event that she hosted at her home with all the glory of her garden and Lee Greenwood singing God Bless the USA at Molly's home. Truly she is in heaven. And ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly, as we do adjourn in honor, I would entreat us to remember those who grieve for those lost loved ones and pray for them too, like my neighbor Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Nielsen. That concludes our adjourn in memories. Without objection, we will return now to 8th Extraordinary Session. We are preparing to adjourn the 8th extraordinary session. We are waiting for some paperwork from the Senate to do that. Mr. Torrico.
Madam Speaker, under motion resolutions, I request unanimous consent to allow Ms. Evans to print a letter in the Journal regarding AB 7.
Without objection. Mr. Torrico, for what purpose?
Madam Speaker, there is a resolution at the desk to adjourn the 8th extraordinary session. I request unanimous consent to take up ACR 1 without reference to file for the purpose of third reading today.
Without objection. Clerk will read.
Assembly concurrent resolution 1 by Assembly Member Torrico relative to the final adjournment of 2019 8th extraordinary session of the legislature.
Mr. Torrico, you may open.
Madam Speaker, ACR 1 sets the date for the final adjournment of the 8th extraordinary session. I vote.
Seeing no debate or discussion, we need to do this on a roll call vote, members. Clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. This is to adjourn 8th extraordinary session. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the votes. Ayes 61, noes 1. The resolution is adopted. Mr. Torrico.
Hereby request immediate transmittal to the Senate.
Without objection, clerk will note. Members, we are adjourned. Sine die. 8th extraordinary session is adjourned. We return to regular session. A motion to adjourn. All business has been concluded in our regular session. Motion to adjourn is in order. Mr. Torrico moves. Mr. Hagman seconds that this House will be adjourned. Seeing no further business before this House? Quorum call is lifted. We are adjourned.